The League of Nations was set up in 1919, directly after World War I, in order to stop such a war from ever happening again. It was the idea of America's President Woodrow Wilson. The League had four main aims. Firstly, to encourage cooperation amongst the world's countries in order to prevent any future wars. Secondly, disarmament. The idea was to try and disarm the world's countries of weapons. Next was to improve social conditions. This meant trying to cure diseases, improve working conditions, and so on. And finally, the League's main aim was world peace, its aims in being too ambitious. But nevertheless, the League was generally seen by many as the only way to maintain peace in the world. It must be said, however, that another world war broke out only 20 years after the creation of the League. World War II began in 1939, and many historians have condemned the League for failing to achieve its aims. We should therefore focus on the key question: was the League of Nations a total failure? The League's weaknesses. The League did not have an army, and therefore no powerful means to enforce its decisions, and instead had to rely on countries like Britain and France. Another critical weakness was that the most powerful country in the world, the USA, did not join. When President Woodrow Wilson returned home, the American Congress refused to allow the USA to join the League, as instead it wanted to stay out of Europe's arguments in order to prevent them being dragged into another war. In addition, the League's organisation was confusing. It had a council of the most important countries, a secretariat that organised the League, a variety of different agencies that dealt with the slave trade and drug dealing, etc., and an assembly where countries met just once a year. Making decisions was therefore a problem because everyone had to agree. This meant that it took a long time to get anything done. Decisions had to be made unanimously, and this slowed down the entire process. Successes of the League. In the 1920s, it can be said that the League was successful. It took 500,000 prisoners of war home after World War I, it helped to arrest slave traders and drug dealers, and it made progress in helping to control and cure diseases like malaria and leprosy. It was also successful in solving problems before they turned into wars. An example was the Ireland Islands dispute between Sweden and Finland. The League brought the countries together and solved the problem. Another example was in 1923, when Italy and Greece nearly went to war over the island of Corfu. Failures of the League of Nations in the 1930s. In the early 1930s, two events destroyed people's belief in the ability of the League of Nations to stop wars. In both situations, the League did not act quickly enough or made poor decisions about how to stop the aggressive nations. At the same time, this showed people like Hitler that the League was not strong enough to stand in his way. In 1932, Japan invaded Manchuria, an area of China. This was clearly an example of a strong country invading a weaker one. The League took 1 full year to send Lord Lytton to make a report about what should be done. This was a long and frustrating delay. The League wanted to ban all countries from trading with Japan, but it bought most of its goods from the USA, who was not part of the League. In fact, Britain actually wanted to stay friends with Japan, and without the threat of attack, Japan got away with it and simply left the League. In 1935, Italy invaded Abyssinia in Africa, nowadays known as Ethiopia. Mussolini, the Italian leader, wanted an empire, and he sent his troops to attack. Again, this was another example of a strong country attacking a weaker one. Britain and France were still feeling the effects of the Depression. The League could have banned countries from trading with Italy, but unemployment was rising, and they felt that to stop trading would mean the loss of even more jobs. Instead, Britain and France actually made a secret plan to allow Italy to control an area of Abyssinia. This was great news to Hitler. During this period, Hitler got away with rearmament, marching his troops into the Rhineland and joining up with Austria, all against the Treaty of Versailles. So why did the League fail? The League of Nations had no real power. Without an army, stronger countries did what they wanted, whereas weaker ones did as they were told. The absence of the USA meant that the strongest country in the world could not help to solve the League's problems. And ultimately, the memories of the horrors of World War I meant that Britain and France did not want to get involved. Even if they wanted to, the Depression meant that these two major countries could not really afford any expensive threats. As previously mentioned, the League failed to prevent the most devastating war of all time, that of World War II, that begun in 1939 and ended in 1945.